This is the modern.
This is the
most modern room in the house.
This is the most modern room.
Yeah,
in the house.
yeah. This was built in the 1840s, 1850s.
This is Powderham Castle, home of the Earl of Devon. His ancestors were beheaded and exiled by the Tudors. But it's a different type of defenestration taking place now under the Labour government. The Earl is set to lose his seat in the House of Lords.
You know, this has been the seat of the Earl of Devon, who happens to play a role in Parliament that the Earl of Devon has done since the title was created in 1142. In a lot of other cultures, you know, you seek to preserve that heritage.
The end of this parliamentary session marks the final chapter of the hereditary peers, members of the Lords who inherited their titles through their families.
What will I be missing once you're gone from the House of Lords?
You know, I think you're missing that continuity of the House. I think you're missing certain members of the House that are not there for political purposes. They're there, yes, by birthright, but they're there by a sense of duty and a sense of service. I think hereditaries also bring a multi-generational view of what we're doing.
Because you've said that argument before in terms of, like, you know, your lineage can go back hundreds of years, back towards the Crusades. I've never really understood, or if you could explain sort of, if your family was involved in the Crusades, how that is relevant today.
A country that forgets its history forgets its responsibilities. And the point around the Crusades, the point about our relationship with the Middle East, it was illustrated today on a piece I heard on the news where there was a journalist who was there in Iran in the 1950s, you know, when the first oil men were getting off the aeroplanes to capture the oil of Iran for Britain. It's like, if you forget about this history, you begin to think that other people are responsible, that it's not our responsibility. Well, it is our responsibility. And having members in one chamber of your parliament who have that collective memory that goes back centuries allows you as a government, as a parliament, to, as it were, retain that memory and to use it.
So can't you turn that on its head and say, well, actually, you know, the problems with the Middle East are historical, and part of that problem is an aristocracy who made mistakes. And we've moved towards a situation where we don't want aristocrats making mistakes and messing up the world. We want democratically elected politicians to make those decisions.
If you think it's better to have no memory, and you think it's better to govern with no thought to history, then I agree with you. But I personally feel that you need to learn from history, and you really need, and if you have the ability to encapsulate within your parliamentary system a little bit of history, I'm not saying it needs to dominate, and I certainly, obviously, wholly agree with you that aristocrats should not dominate, should not take a leading role within our parliamentary.
I have a history degree, other politicians have history degrees, we study history. I mean, I understand your point, but getting rid of the hereditaries doesn't mean we forget our history, does it?
No, it doesn't entirely at all, but it also, by having them present within the parliamentary system, means you are necessarily respecting and being somewhat deferential to the history that brought us to where we are today.
But is this also not just part of our history? That, I mean, one of the things about our continuity and our constitution is that it evolves, it's unwritten, and it moves, and this is just part of that evolution.
Yeah.
So
and it
will,
be
proud of this moment.
Yeah, and I'm personally really pleased to have been able to be here at the end of the role of the hereditary peers. I'm not going to fight it.
The Earl may not have fought to stay on, but plenty of others did. New Labour first promised to abolish the hereditaries, and in 1999 they managed to reduce them from 758 to 92. A quarter of a century later, a new Labour government has finally removed them. Well, nearly. Around 24 could stay on as life peers after a deal was done to get the legislation through.
Does the king come up these stairs?
Yes, he does.
Those stairs, yeah.
Lord Strathclyde is a former leader of the House of Lords.
Is this a prime office
It
space?
certainly is.
Yeah.
And one of those hereditary peers hoping to stay on in the upper chamber.
The manifesto said to get rid of them entirely. It didn't say get rid of them, but some of them can stay on as life peers. That sounds like a cheating of the system.
That's up to the government to decide. It's not my manifesto. It's the Labour Party's
But is your argument that the hereditaries, none of the hereditaries pushed to try and stay on? You all said, we're all happy to go, let's all go. You didn't say some of us should stay.
What we said, and what I said in particular, is that this is the wrong way of doing a fundamental reform of the House of Lords. The argument is not about hereditary peers. It is, who do you want sitting in the second chamber of the UK Parliament? Who do you want to legislate? Do you want to have prime ministerial appointment, or do you want a proper and serious-minded reform?
Are you worried, though, that in your criticism that the Lords is now completely politically appointed, you are now one of those political appointments?
Well,
You've crossed over to the dark side.
If I am appointed to the successor body, then yes, I would, and I'm sorry about that. But I always know where my roots are and where I come from, and what I'm here to do, and indeed what I have done over the course of the last few years.
And so, if you get a chance to stay on as a life peer, will you make reform your priority?
Very much so, and as I have done over the last 20 years. And I know you would argue that it hasn't been hugely successful.
With concerns about the next phase of reform, are we any closer to a genuinely democratic House of Lords?
We should look at participation requirement, that people have to make a contribution. We should look at retirement age, so as people retire, we can bring in new people with new expertise, new skills, new experience, and let's see what House of Lords comes up with. So I'm hoping we'll get something that we can all get around.
But you're hoping there's more reforms. Can you ensure there will be by the end of this 5-year Labour government?
I'm quite optimistic about this because I think people know that you can't leave things in aspic and nothing changes.
When the next parliamentary session opens, you won't have individuals like the Earl of Devon, who has a family history and knowledge going back 1,000 years. How will you be able to cope without that?
So to be honest, I've got family history going back 1,000 years, but they won't actually people who had titles. We've all got a family history that goes back a long way.
So you'll manage without him?
I think we will. We miss him. He's a nice guy. I like him. But at the end of the day, the hereditary peers aren't the only one who've got history in their family, expertise and experience.
The Earl of Devon will ensure his family history lives on. With Powderham Castle still open to the public, the famous red robe now resigned to the cupboard upstairs or in the paintings on the wall.
I think there are reasons to regret the loss of the hereditary peers and House of Lords in the ways that I've articulated, but it is progress. And it depends where you want to go with that progress.
But I guess you also, being a realist, understand that there will be plenty of people in this country who aren't upset about losing hereditaries.
Oh, absolutely. Plenty of people will rejoice it, and all power to them. I'm not going to begrudge them that progress. And I'm not resentful at all. I haven't done this for shits and giggles. I haven't done it just because I'm privileged to take a seat in the House of Lords. I do it because it's a job and it's a duty and it's a role. And I think that is something that I will miss, and I think something that potentially the nation will miss too.